I'm going to call this meeting to order. Councilmember Britt Blackwell to give invocation and pledge of allegiance.
If you'll bow your heads. God bless this council and guide us in our duties ahead this evening. May we make the best decision for our citizens and the welfare of York County. In your name, amen. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Would Brian Musgrave please come forward for the oath of office? Fair enough. Brian Musgrave. Under appearances, we have an update from emergency management staff regarding the coronavirus and how York County is staying prepared. Thank you, sir.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and Council. This is just an update on the coronavirus that's dominating the headlines nationally and throughout the world, and we're all keeping a close eye on it. I want to kind of speak on what emergency management, your local emergency management office is doing and what we do and how we fit into DHEC's plan and the CDC's plan. Currently, everyone wants answers to questions that we don't have the answers to, and we're just as interested in that information as you are. Almost daily, we get information updates from the Department of Health and Environmental Control, which by state statute is the public health authority for South Carolina. There is no county equivalent counterpart to that public health preparedness piece. So we work with them, and their plans is to manage the crisis side of it. CDC, DHEC manages the early stages, prediction, vaccines, all the many things that comes along with early detection. And then the emergency management piece is the consequences of what happens. So they're sort of on the front end of it, and we're sort of on the back end. And we have had plans in place since the mid-2000s, back when H1N1, swine flu, bird flu, all the other flus were the topic of the day. But currently right now in South Carolina, there has been no cases. U.S. Has had 22 cases, and only 2 cases have been person to person, although those are the most concerning. DHEC and CDC has been predicting the arrival of this disease or virus for weeks now, and have been ramping up their plans as such. Currently, the only spread in the U.S. has been in California, Oregon, and Washington. Their recommendations, which we also promote, is exactly what you would do for the flu. So good hand washing, good hygiene, staying at home if you're sick, keeping your kids home from school if they're sick. And so our job at this time is basically brokers of information to pass on those tips. Although still much is yet to be learned, right now the average U.S. citizen, us, has a very low risk for contracting the virus and a very low risk of actually having any other issues other than normal seasonal flu-like symptoms. There are plans in place locally for medical surge issues. Our hospital and hospitals in the area work with the South Carolina and North Carolina public health preparedness programs to identify beds in which may be needed, and this is not unusual. You may remember and recall standalone beds were set up several occasions for seasonal flu, just to keep the flu outside of the hospital. That is, you may see that, especially in other countries, as it ramps up. So right now, the plans for monitoring, quarantining, the medical surge side, and the supply interruption could be something we're faced with. But this is not unusual to the normal seasonal flu planning that we do already. Thankfully, this coronavirus, that the novel strain of it that we're seeing, the mortality rate is not as high as some people are projecting, although those numbers can change. Right now, we think it's very much controlled, and the plans that have been in place for a long time are well funded and well practiced. Any questions?
I think we're good.
All right.
Thank you for the update. No one signed up for public forum. Easy enough. Any items to be removed from the consent agenda? If not, do we have a motion?
Move to approve consent agenda.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. Public hearings. Rezoning action, public hearing and consider first reading, case number 19-30, tax map 171000010, to rezone from PD to LI, 22.75 acres at 130 Highway 161 North Clover. Is there anyone here against?
There are questions, if you'll allow.
We will, but I want to warn you, we can't answer you back during public hearing, but we can refer you to someone who can answer those questions. So feel free to come on up if you are against. All right. Anyone in favor? Mr. Christopher.
I'm the applicant.
Yes.
Okay. Good evening, Chairman Johnson and council members. My name is Dwayne Christopher of 2424 India Hook Road, Rock Hill, South Carolina. I am a landscape architect consulting on the rezoning project representing the owner. At the time of the start of the application, the owner of the property was Mr. Poma. The owner now is Curitan Realty and Investments, who closed on the property last week. Curitan Company and sister companies are the owners and users of the property. We have been working on the due diligence of the property since last August. I have with me Mr. Robert Land and Mr. Chris Mahar, that are company officials with the new ownership. They will add to my presentation and be available to answer questions. This property is one that I was familiar with due to the fact that starting in 1998, when I rezoned the property from a trucking company use to a PUD. This planned unit development for a client at the time was NVR Building Products Company. The PUD had many restrictions and many uses that would allow a wide variety of commercial, light industrial, institutional, and warehousing. Light industrial was one of the allowed uses. This project would have fallen in line with that first PUD. The property changed ownership within a couple years, and the project came to council in 2007 under a new owner. I have the past zoning exhibits with me, in front here, if any one of you would like to see the wording. Since 2007, the property has had limited use that is productive to the owner and to the community. The property has been collecting unwanted visitors, with vandalism stripping the buildings of valuable metal. 3 acres on the east side was sold in July of 2017 to Bethany Santiago Volunteer Fire Department. Their facility is now under construction. With the sale of this 3-acre parcel from the original 26 acres, the PD zoning became technically and legally null and void and has been in limbo since that time. There were several interested parties that have looked at the property, but because of the significant investment to the building as well as the rezoning the property, no party moved forward until now. So with that small amount of history, we come to the new owner, and what are the plans with a rezoning to light industrial again from the existing PD? The new owner has a specific company for the property. The company is Carolina Traffic Devices, and along with Curitin Company, has operations in Kings Mountain, Charlotte, North Carolina, and Atlanta, Georgia. The large structure on the site which would be this sandy color area, here's the total property. Is primarily open and on the interior and will be upgraded to the new building codes. The activity that will occur inside will be the cutting, bending, and preparation of rebar to transport to the company's facility in Kings Mountain, North Carolina. At their facility in Kings Mountain, the rebar is used in the reinforcement of concrete traffic barriers. The rebar will come in on flatbed trailers and then leave on trailers. I want to share that their facility in Kings Mountain is new and is very busy making concrete barriers. If you have traveled on I-85, you can see why there is a need for concrete barriers for the next several years. In addition to the rebar manipulation activity, the company assembles and mounts devices on truck bodies that are used as traffic control and truck-mounted attenuators. These are trucks that one would see on road and highway construction projects. Flashing lights and arrows and devices alike. This operation will be in the main building. The exact locations of the different operations will be planned out accordingly. The trucks with these devices will be stored on the property, in sheds, and on the outside area until used on highway construction projects. I have a couple pictures of the machine and rebar that I am speaking of, and also a couple pictures of the type of trucks that receive the upfits for traffic control devices. These pictures that you see on your screen are the devices, the rebar that's in their existing facility in Kings Mountain. So you can see what will be used at their revamped facility in Kings Mountain. There's the machine that bends the rebar. It's sort of, when I was there, it sounds like a heartbeat. Bum, 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 bum. It's really neat. Then there's all their concrete devices all stacked up, ready to go to the interstate on the outside. Now here's the trucks that you see that are before devices are on. And then I think there might be one more picture. There's a typical type device there. So that's it for my show pictures. Thank you very much, Karen. The last activity that will be occurring is office staff. The plan is now to add about 5,300 square feet of office within the main building. This staff will be the management, sales, and support personnel. The number of employees will start out about 10, and then in the future, potentially growing to 30-plus employees. There are existing sheds on the property that will be used to keep product inventory and other supplies in. The building, just to reiterate, the building will be upfitted to new codes. This will cost a significant amount of investment. Once we have determined all the square footages, then the site requirements will also be designed and constructed to what is required. Those site requirements include parking, storage, pavements, access points, septic fields, well water, stormwater, and buffer yard plantings. The light industrial is the only zoning that fits this operation. This operation is a low site impact, low noise impact, and no chemical impact. There are no plastic products manufactured here and no hazardous waste. In addressing the zoning findings, number one, the rural character for this property is a character that is portrayed erroneously. I understand land use planning, but this is a very site-specific, and we have a use that will work. The property had been a trucking terminal site in the early 70s. Cottage industries or farm markets at this location is highly unrealistic. Updating the property and bringing life to this area is a high priority for this location rather than a poorly looking site. We have an institutional use coming online shortly, a fire station adjacent to us, and a food and beverage commercial establishment across the street. Does the request violate the land use plan? The record shows that for 50 years or more, the site had been a light industrial character, and the new owner will bring a fresh new look with a viable business to York County. Number three, appropriate uses. Here again, the property has been looked at many times over the past few years. We now have an owner that is going to bring the property back from the dead. We had the property zoned in the PUD for light industrial in the past. We have a very good fit now. There's no school impact, is not a factor. Traffic mitigation is not required because of the low impact on traffic. Number six, regarding utilities, the site has its own well water system and septic fields and will handle the site as they have in the past. Number seven, this line item is the availability of vacant land or current use in the vicinity. This item is not material to the rezoning. We have an existing building and site that we are adapting to a new use without having to look to more land developing. In conclusion, we ask council for their support in rezoning the property to light industrial as per our application. We have an owner that is taking this site and turning it into a good working property for commerce. Traffic is not an issue. We are bringing the site to life with updated codes, painting the buildings, the landscape yards will be maintained, provide employment and revenue for the county. All good points for this property. Thank you for your attention. Possibly Chris or Bob might want to add some of their own points and highlighting that I may have left out. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anyone else in favor? Just make sure you give your name and address, please.
Yes, sir. Evening, Council. I am Chris Mahar, Vice President, Carolina Traffic Devices. I reside at 504 Sugar Tree Drive here in Rock Hill, South Carolina. I am a member of the family who owns the property and the companies that'll occupy it, and I've been asked to make some remarks on behalf of the family to convey our connection to York County. Dwayne mentioned in his presentation Curtin Realty and Investments, Curtin Co. and Carolina Traffic Devices, and while they are all technically separate companies, they're all owned, we look at them as collectively as one company, and they're all owned by the Curtin family of York County, particularly of Clover, Lake Wiley, and Rock Hill. The Curtin family has been proud to call York County home for many, many years. And in fact, most of the family has been raised here and educated here. You will find us at the Strawberry Festival, at the Come See Me Festival, Summerfest in Christmasville, certainly at the Curtin Farms Fest, and you will run into us at the Garden Cafe, the Copper Pub, or getting a milkshake from Hobo's. You might pass us on the trails at Kings Mountain State Park or on the Greenway, or at the Rock Hill River Walk. You'll see us in the stands on Friday night for a football game, and in the pews on Sunday morning. And our kids attend York County Public Schools. We are not just another Charlotte company moving across the border to take advantage of the taxes in schools. We are your neighbors, we are your constituents, and we are members of the community. The decision to move our headquarters from Charlotte to York has a personal aspect to it that should not be overlooked. There are certainly business reasons to make the move to York County, but because of the significant challenges this property brings, because of its neglected state, I would not say for certain that if this property were not in York County, that we may not pursue it. We love this county and love the idea of bringing our headquarters home and being able to provide job opportunities in a part of York County where there are few. As members of this community, we feel a major responsibility to be good neighbors. We are committed to working with the local community to ensure that our presence enhances quality of life and does not detract from it. By cleaning up the site, eliminating a place for unwanted visitors and vandals to recreate, and by creating job opportunities, we will make a positive impact on the neighborhood. We are a well-established company, having been in business for 26 years. We plan on being at this site for a long time, and our investment into rejuvenating the property, partially fueled by our deep roots and strong ties to this community, should serve as a testament to our long-term commitment to York County. It is our desire to have a long, prosperous future at this site, and I second Dwayne's request for the council to support the rezoning. On behalf of the Curtin family, I thank you for your consideration, and I hope you allow us to make York County not only our place of residence, but our home for business. Thank you.
Anyone else in favor? If anyone has questions that haven't been answered, you can certainly talk to the applicant afterwards or speak with the county manager, David Hudspeth, who's down there, and he can direct you to the correct person on staff to give you the answers you need. Is there a motion to end public hearing?
Move to close public hearing.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, hearing none.
Move to
Motion.
approve first reading.
Second.
Any discussion? Mr. Winkler?
Yes, I'd just like to say, about a year or so ago, I came out and looked at that property with the realtor who had it listed. There's more than a little bit of work that needs to be done on that property. There were mattresses in several places where homeless had been sleeping. There was obvious use of the facilities that aren't there, but the buildings were gutted. The office areas, there are some office areas there, but you'd be better off probably tearing them down and starting over. We did walk through those. So I'm glad to see that somebody's willing to put some money back into that place. And I know it's a concern. I spoke with the Bethany Santiago Fire Department, the chief, and a couple others before they moved bought that property to put the second station out there. And they've had calls out there for them, burning stuff inside some of those buildings and stuff when they're, trying to stay warm in the wintertime and people were housed in them and stuff. So I'm glad to see that somebody's willing to step up and do that. I would like for you to please meet with the neighbors and see what questions they have if they weren't answered, by your presentation tonight. But from speaking with the owners and stuff in the last week or two and from visiting the property in the past, I definitely support this, and I think it's a good move for the citizens and the neighbors there to have a nice facility there than instead of a homeless encampment that it was turning into.
Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, hearing none, motion passes. Rezoning, public hearing and consider first reading case number 20-03, UD rezoning in council districts 4 and 5. Is there anyone here against? Anyone against? Anyone in favor? Yes, sir. Feel free to come forward. And again, name and address, please.
Marshall Walker. I live in 2951 University Drive in Lancaster, South Carolina. I'm one of the owners of this property. The reason we want to rezone it is because we understand that UD is going out, and now would be the appropriate time to get it back into the residential UD, and feel like we could use it. We would be able to do what we want with it more so than with it being taken and you know, from what as we understand it, you were gonna do away with UD, and we needed to do something with it, so we went to RUD, and that's the reason for my being here.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else in favor?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? New motion?
Move to approve. First reading.
There's a move and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, hearing none, motion passes. Council to hold a public hearing and consider approving second reading of an ordinance authorizing a third amendment to the intergovernmental agreement by and between the City of Rock Hill and York County relating to the Textile Corridor redevelopment plan, the amended downtown redevelopment plan, the Red River redevelopment plan, the Manchester Village redevelopment plan, and other matters related thereto. Is there anyone here who wants to speak against? Is there anyone who would like to speak in favor?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Second, another motion.
Motion to approve. Second.
Any discussion?
I do have
Ms. Cox?
a comment. At the first hearing on this, I voted to pass this through first reading, and there's 3 readings that are required. I'm going to actually allow second reading as well, seeing that we haven't had any folks from the community come out and speak, but I do want to say a few things. The event center in downtown Rock Hill, it's phenomenal, it's exciting, nobody's opposed to that. I think everybody up here on this council thinks that's a great thing. The question is, who should be paying for it? Why is it taking so long to pay for it? And how should it be funded? Should it be funded by taxpayers and schools, or should it be privately funded? The auditors confirmed when they went and looked at the books on this that TIFs generally are 20 to 25 years. This TIF is double that. This is the longest TIF they've ever seen, and I think it may be the longest TIF that's in South Carolina. To me, that's why this warrants some review. In 2015, it was one of the first things that I did when I was on council. We were asked to look at the TIF, and at that time, it did not appear, and that moved forward without my vote and without my support. And to be clear, if we were voting on whether or not to extend that TIF again, I would still be a no. I would say we shouldn't be doing this, but that's not the issue that's before this council. Today, the issue is whether or not we should allow the expansion of the debt cap, provided that there are specific controls in place that prevent a further extension. And that's the issue before us. And so I'm trying real hard to stay focused on that, but I think there are some things that I do want to note, and I want to make sure that if I'm incorrect on this after looking at the audit report, I want to be corrected on it. My understanding, if you look on page 13 and page 11 of the audit report, it appears that there was issued about $50.5 million in new debt to cover $50.5 million worth of projects. Now, after that, the city's refunded and refinanced this debt 4, maybe 5 times over the last 30 years, racking up significant interest and not paying off the principal. After 30 years, it's clear that we've paid more in interest and in fees to the banks than we have on the principal debt, and that's the problem. After 30 years, you should have something to show for that. In fact, according to this report, $7.6 million in interest is paid. We've paid $1.2 million just to issue the debt, $230,000 to underwriters, and $300,000 in capitalized interest. That's interest on interest. I would like to know, and it seems to me that we need to get a handle on this. There needs to be something to show that this debt will actually be able to be paid off. There still is $46 million, according to the auditor. There still is $46 million worth of principal that's owed on this debt. I don't like supporting an increase in a debt ceiling when it's clear that we're not going to be able to make headway on the debt. To me, there's many other ways to fund this. However, I understand from the other side agreements that exist that the Rock Hill schools will be getting cash payments and resource officer funding, which is important. I mean, obviously, the school district is out here looking to do a bond referendum, and we need to support our schools. This is a concern for me when we start allowing that money to go somewhere else. This amendment, as I understand it, reduces the ability to refund the debt, which means that we're not going to have these opportunities. It's going to be limited to the existing debt. There's going to be controls on how the money can be spent. We're going to require annual audits, and we're going to require reserves in place to fund the debt. So I'm allowing second reading because I think it's important for our community that we finish what we've started. But I think it's important for the facts to get out there, and I would expect that the journalists who are covering this, they need to do some homework and take a look at this, because I think the county has worked very hard to support the city on this, and any suggestion otherwise to me is just wrong. At third reading, I really would like to have some more assurance that we're going to be able to make sure that those payments are going to be made and that this extension is not going to be indefinite, that it will be done in 2039.
Any other discussion? Dr. Blackwell?
Per the points of Ms. Cox, and I won't get into all the weeds of what she pointed out, probably some of you sitting there saying, what is she saying? Because she was real exact in the point she was making. But when this first came about, I pointed out to our finance director, Mr. Madden, that I probably couldn't support this based on its history of points Ms. Cox did better than I could pointing those facts out. But when he came up with his final ordinance that built in all these accountability check and balances, it made it something that I could have accepted and approved, because it provides for that needed accountability that we have to have on this, and because of that, I am going to support it.
Ms. Love?
So I may ultimately be a no on this vote at third reading, but out of consideration for Councilman Roddy, who has asked me to support this in his absence tonight, so that it doesn't die right here in front of us, I'm gonna vote yes tonight.
I'm just gonna speak with my vote.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
No.
One. Motion passes. Council will consider a first reading of an ordinance to adopt the I-77 South Corridor Small Area Plan as an addition to York Forward, the 2035 York County Comprehensive Plan, pursuant to the Code of Laws of South Carolina, Title VI, Chapter 29, entitled South Carolina Local Government Comprehensive Planning Enabling Act of 1994, to hold a public hearing to provide for other matters related thereto.
Good evening, Council. I'm Jonathan Warno, Assistant Planning Director. Karen, if you go to the beginning of the presentation. Oh, sorry. Thank you. So as way of a bit of background on this small area plan effort, last year, Council adopted a set of strategic goals, one of those being a growth management goal. An implementation strategy for that growth management goal was to identify 3 to 4 areas to study and address the impacts of future growth. So the I-77 corridor, the I-77 South corridor, was identified as the first of these areas to study, the second of which being Lake Wylie, and the third being a reevaluation of the Dave Lyle extension plan, which is already part of our comprehensive plan. So one of the reasons that the I-77 South corridor was identified as an area to study is its importance to the sustained economic growth in the county. Another being the development pressures that are in the county, in this area of the county, with the Panthers development coming in with a lot of large undeveloped properties in the southern portion of the corridor that are available for development, and a lot of the conflicts between growth and the rural edge. So this corridor does have a mix of the city of Rock Hill, a lot of industrial development, as well as rural homesteads and suburban-styled neighborhoods. So there are some natural conflicts between those land uses. So the study area itself is identified as unincorporated York County within a 2-mile buffer of I-77 on either side, south of the Catawba River. So for reference on this particular map, that is the color blue. The city of Rock Hill, for reference, is shaded gray. Fort Mill is shaded brown, and the Catawba Indian Nation is shaded green on this map. So the goal for this small area plan is to maximize the corridor's economic development potential as the county's transportation spine, while simultaneously minimizing the impacts of new development on existing residential areas. So in the course of staff's analysis on this small area plan, we looked at several different factors. First being economic development. So what are the employment trends in this particular corridor and the county at large? Where are the future job growth potential? Where is that? And what are the needs for that job growth to be realized? On transportation, we looked at where some of the most high volume roads are located, as well as the proposed and being implemented infrastructure projects, where those are located currently, as well as where truck routes might go with new development coming in. Additionally, we looked at utilities, so where are the Rock Hill water and sewer lines currently in existence, and how might those serve or expand in the future? We looked at existing land uses, so where are those employment uses now? Where are schools? Where are other institutional type uses? Just to make sure that we're identifying where those are currently as they're developed. We looked at the underlying zoning districts in the corridor, so the future development potential across the corridor, what people can do by right with the property that they currently own. We also looked at the existing comprehensive plan guidance. So in the future, what is the current plan recommending be built? Additionally, we met several times with the City of Rock Hill's Planning Department. They gave us feedback on some of the recommendations that we were working on, as well as some of the issues in the corridor, so we factored in their input as well. During the whole process, the public was heavily involved. At the outset of the project, we had a public survey that went out. We had over 1,500 respondents and several hundred open-ended responses that staff read through all of them, I promise you that. We incorporated a lot of that feedback that we received into the recommendations that are included in the plan. We also had 2 public meetings during this process. We had one in September that was a public input meeting. So we had exhibits that were put up that depicted what the existing conditions were in the corridor and asked people for their thoughts on what is and isn't working in the corridor, on land use, and things that they encountered in their daily lives that they found to be difficult, or what their hopes were for things that were missing. We also had a public feedback meeting in December where we brought a draft list of the recommendations that are included in the plan to the public and asked for their input and comment on those as well. And the third and final opportunity for public input will be at the next county council meeting, where there'll be a public hearing on this item. So getting into a summary of the issues that are identified in the small area plan. On conflicting land uses, employment-driven land uses in the corridor, existing and planned, may create adverse impacts on residential and civic uses. Lack of transitions, few opportunities for mixed uses, the existing locations of schools and concentrations of distribution facilities limit the ability of the built environment to transition fluidly between uses. Congestion, access to I-77 is only a few connections from rural roads, transitioning countryside commutes abruptly into urban traffic delays. Large undeveloped properties. Development pressures on large properties or parcel assemblages may prioritize speculative development that fails to integrate with the surrounding community. Open space. Potential opportunities for passive outdoor recreation or dedicated park space diminish as the corridor urbanizes. And finally, employment. Harmonious balance of interstate employment and other uses is needed to maintain economic viability and preserve quality of life. So getting into the recommendations that are included in the plan, this map that you see on the screen here, that's on pages 40 and 41 of the small area plan that you should have. So these are recommended changes to the future land use map. So this is the map that projects what the county should be building, or what should be built in these particular areas, not that the county is doing all of that building. So in area identified as number 1, and again, most of these proposals are changing the I-77 corridor employment future land use designation, which is employment-driven uses, industrial things of that nature that are going to bring a high volume of jobs. So we're proposing to transition that to something else for most of these. So the first one, identified as one that's depicted in brown, outlined in black. So those areas right now, I-77 corridor employment, we're proposing that those be changed to municipal infill as a recognition that these areas are largely isolated from the rest of York County. You would characterize them mostly as donut hole properties. So it's hard to have impactful planning on those properties when they're so remote from other properties that York County would have control over the planning. So it's in deference to the city of Rock Hill, we would consult their planning documents instead when it comes to review these items for land use decisions. Number two, this area just south of Sturgis Road, going from I-77 corridor employment to neighborhood residential. And the reason being there that to the south and to the east in that particular area, it's all residential, planned and built, and it doesn't have direct access to Dave Lyle Boulevard. And as an isolated bit of I-77 corridor employment, it didn't make a whole lot of sense to leave that particular piece there. So we're proposing to move that to neighborhood residential. Number three, similarly, surrounded by neighborhood residential and even rural residential going eastward. If this area were to be developed with employment uses, you'd have a lot of potentially truck traffic that would be added to Hopewell Road. So planning staff is looking to prevent adding trucks to Hopewell in addition to all of the relatively new truck traffic that's now going on Springdale. Number four, this is currently a rural center on the comprehensive, in our comprehensive plan. And we are proposing that it become a neighborhood center instead. So that's just a matter of scale, saying that this should be a node that serves more people than a typical rural center, which might have a store or two. This would be servicing all of the folks that live in Leslie and all of the rural folks that are driving westward. Number five, this is the only part of our recommendations that we're proposing to add to I-77 corridor employment. And the reason being, as long as traffic is accessing this particular area from Oak Pond Road, it's at an intersection with Neely's Creek Road, and it has an opportunity to maybe serve as a neighborhood serving use, something like a grocery store. Number six, this area, I-77 corridor employment currently, and that includes Mount Holly Elementary. So planning staff felt it would be more appropriate to have the elementary school serve as a line of demarcation between the employment uses and the residential community to the south and to the east. So rather than having industrial development, a school, industrial development, neighborhood, we'd have a better transition there. Number seven, these are areas to the very south of the corridor near the Chester County line. They are currently shown as I-77 corridor employment, but it does not currently have access to utilities, and it is unlikely in the near future to have access to utilities. So we felt it was more appropriate to reflect this as rural residential, which is the current land use there. And finally, numbers 8 and 9, these are very small areas that were shown to be employment areas, but in context to the surrounding area, it's more appropriate to change them to the immediate vicinity. So getting into the text recommendations, I won't go through all of them. I will summarize them here for you. There are 18 listed towards the back of that small area plan document. On the zoning side, there's a recommendation to consider adding business and technology park and mixed use as new zoning districts. Currently, if you wanted to do a development of scale and of a mixed variety, you'd have to do a PUD in most cases. So having additional zoning districts would better enable developers to do that and have some more predictability on the county side as well. Second, we have consider warehousing, wholesale, and distribution establishments to be permitted by special exception with conditions ensuring compatibility. So trying to make sure with all of the warehouses that are going to come into the corridor that they be approved by special exception rather than just being permitted by right. with the conditions making sure that they fit into the neighborhood in which they're proposed to be located. Land use transitions. So we want to isolate uses that have noxious impacts. So you don't want a concrete crushing facility next to a school, things of that nature, so trying to do that. Related, removing schools as a permitted use in industrial and light industrial districts. So if a new school is going to be proposed to be located, we would propose that it not be permitted in those zoning districts, so in the future you're not having those immediate impacts between two disparate land uses, as well as losing potential property that could be developed for jobs and employment. Because it's very difficult to rezone something from residential to industrial versus going the other way. Some of the other recommendations: higher land use intensity and building height closer to the interstate, and stepping down the closer you get to neighborhoods and the further away you get from the interstate. Improving visual transitions regarding large parking lots and application of architectural standards. Monitoring the consumption of land, which is prioritized for employment. And discouraging single-family housing adjacent to I-77. On transportation, ensuring new developments maintain an acceptable road level of service and improve the pedestrian network. Encourage implementation of the RFAT's Collector Street Plan. Monitor impacts of proposed mixed-use site and I-77 interchange that is associated with the Carolina Panthers facility. Obviously, that will have a large impact on not only the city, but the rest of the corridor as well. And to coordinate with Rock Hill on expanding MyRide to large employment centers that are in the corridor. On economic development, to collaborate and engage with developers and infrastructure stakeholders to organize and plan for growth. To monitor economic trends to recommend regulatory changes that are responsive to the market realities. Targeted application of tax incentives. And to consider establishing a York County-owned business and technology park in the corridor. And finally, on environment and open spaces, increase the availability and access to open spaces, requiring more to be provided in certain zoning districts with certain development proposals, preserving and providing access to natural features, encouraging meaningful open spaces rather than just leftover unbuildable pieces, and creating a public park in the southeast portion of the corridor. And with that, I'll take any questions that you might have.
Any questions?
Thank you, Jonathan. Will you repeat when the public hearing will be on this issue,
Yes, it'll be at the next county council meeting.
which is
What's the date of? Say again? March 16th.
16th? And folks will be able to comment. I think it would be helpful to at least have the public comments that were circulated, maybe circulated to the council so they can see what the public came out and said. Thank you.
Any others? Dr. Blackwell?
Does this one work? This one had no problem working before the last meeting, before we started, but that's odd that it doesn't work now. Anyway, just one quick question. What's the height restriction on commercial buildings around the corridor county?
Well, countywide right now, it's 50 feet is the height limit. So we're proposing taking another look at that, whether it's appropriate in certain areas to allow a higher height.
Yeah,
than
what
that.
is that, 4 stories?
Yeah, it's about 4. Yeah.
Anyone else? Ms. Love?
So, Jonathan, what would, warehouse and distribution, what would be a reason for that not to be granted a special exception?
Well, I'll kind of get into, normally the changes to the zoning code at this point, we want to funnel into the RECODE project that is ongoing. You'll have a meeting about that at the end of this month. But understanding that this is a particular priority for council, we've put together a draft ordinance of what the special exception conditions would look like for these warehousing facilities. So you'll have an opportunity very shortly to take a look at what those conditions might be. But it's primarily centered around having an access plan where the truck's going to go, making sure that they're not going through residential neighborhoods and things of that nature.
I think my comment would be that, like my number one priority would be that, Councilwoman Cox be 100% in favor of these things. I'm actually frankly a little bit surprised that we're doing this at a council meeting because it looks more like a workshop type load. And as the next person who will have a small area plan coming up, you know, it's hard for me to sit here and look at this and determine if it's the right thing for that district, because I don't know that district. And so my number one priority is that, you know, is that she be okay with this and that the people be okay with this, but I think a lot of it's very difficult to understand. And when I look at this, I can't tell you what this area is gonna look like in 10, 20, 30 years, based on what you know, I just can't, you know, now, talking about some in my district, maybe it's because I'm not familiar with the district, or what's there, or, you know, the intent of what we want there. You know, it would be a lot easier for my district to look at and say, oh, yeah, I know where that is, and I know what that needs to be, and I know what that doesn't need to be. So it just, that is my priority. I think these small area plans, came about because, we saw a need in specific to these two areas, and multiple areas, but specific to these two areas, and I just want to be sure that we're meeting all of those needs, because I don't see an opportunity, to come back and do this over again. So that's my concern.
Well, as part of planning, it's a continual iterative process over, you know, years and decades. And this particular document will serve as an addition to our existing comprehensive plan. And that, as you know, goes through an update every 5 years and a complete revision every 10 years. So there will be many opportunities in the future to keep taking a look at this area, making sure we're getting it right.
So part of my concern, and I appreciate all the work, I can tell that a lot of work is gone into this, a lot of thought. And, you know, one of my, I guess my beefs with, comprehensive plans is that one of the parcels that we did not approve, for my district was, we didn't approve 149 homes as opposed to 89, but my comprehensive plan for that allows 180 something homes. So even more than what we would ever even consider, 3 times what we would even have considered. So to me, comprehensive plan is kind of just a pie in the sky. And what happens while you're looking out at that comprehensive plan, all the bad stuff happens while you've got that way out in front somewhere. And so that's my concern is really and truly what is this gonna look like? Are we gonna be able to say, you know, 20 years from now, well, that's what we wanted it to look like, but that's not how it turned out, because all this happened and the things weren't zoned, you know, we can't go and tell these property owners, well, you know, we're gonna rezone your property to allow for this. So it really is, it's just a kind of a vision. And I don't know, I think my frustration for the past 2 years has been how do we ultimately reach that vision? How do we get there? How do we make what we're talking about and all of this work and effort and all of the input from the taxpayers, how do we make it a reality? That's my, I go to bed every night with that frustration. So if you can help me with that somewhere along the way, that would be great. But I'm just not sure there's an answer.
Yeah, and these are policy documents. They're supposed to guide land use decisions in the county going forward, and they are a reference for both staff and for council and planning commission to make decisions. And there may be times when staff makes recommendations that don't necessarily jive with exactly what the comp plan is recommending. And case you had earlier tonight was a rezoning request where staff was recommending approval on something that the plan didn't envision, just because it made more sense to approve it with the current proposal. And council, as you stated, makes those decisions all the time. So it's a source of guidance to consult, but it doesn't have to be the final word on any decision.
I think sometimes we can we can make something happen, but we can't stop something from happening. And I think that's where the frustration comes from. I see a lot happening.
Mr. Winkler?
2 questions. One you kind of addressed, but we've got public hearing next meeting. I know we've got Recode York County going on, and there was a lot of talk about changing zoning and ordinance stuff in this. Are those, we going to be able to mesh all that together? Because it sounds like we got a workshop on, or we're going to be talking about Recode after we're doing this. Now, I know this is a this is just a small change, but it does affect some of the zoning, so I want to try to understand how
Yep.
that works together.
You're exactly on target. Our consultant for the Recode project, they already have this draft small area plan, so they've already taken a look at it, and they've pulled some of the recommendations that are in here, so they're ready to go. They've included that in their draft code assessment that council will have an opportunity to look at. So they're trying to make sure that as we're a moving target with the county with all of these small area plans and other work that we're doing, that they're keeping track with that, so they make sure they're following up with us as well.
Okay. And then could you go back to the little map you had on page 41?
Yes.
I just have a question. I'm not as familiar with this area as Allison said, but somewhat familiar. When you look at number 3 there, where you're talking about changing that back to a municipal, it's a municipal infill, it looks like it's surrounded, but it's a neighborhood residential.
Yes.
But right below that, you've got the I-77 corridor employment.
Correct.
And it's kind of by itself there.
Yes. And
Why
there-
was that not a recommended change, or is there something there that I'm just not aware of that's already there or something?
Yeah, so that particular area is an extension, the part that is staying pink, that I-77 corridor employment, at least that's our recommendation. That's an extension going eastward of the legacy Rock Hill development, that industrial park. So it kind of leaves room for additional growth of that existing park. And we did include some language in this small area plan guidance that says that there should not be any access to that particular area from Neely Store Road, so it should all be on 21 instead.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other?
Since it is my district, I will say, Jonathan, thank you for doing this report. Probably Allison, and I appreciate Allison's comments. I think it is important that we defer to council members when it doesn't impact the rest of the county to get things done that need to get done. And if they can't get things done, or they get the wrong things done, then they get voted out. I mean, I think it's important to make sure that the folks up here are able to represent their people and to look at it from a county perspective. So I did ask that staff provide this overview, because I think it's important that council hear it. But I've never been one to hide the ball. This is probably why I'm a terrible politician. The reason why I wanted to do this is because District 5 seems to be a magnet sometimes for undesirable things. So we get the landfills, we get the concrete plants, we get all the stuff, and it just doesn't seem to be planned right. And one of the major things that I wanted to accomplish, that I had council support for, unanimous council support for, was to limit and reduce warehouse and distribution, because it provided very little jobs that could even provide a livable wage, and it tears up the roads, and we don't want to be the Roswell's Ferry Road solution to property values going up in Charlotte, and we're the landing place for that. We do need to have some of it. We need to have some of it because our manufacturers and some of our higher-end paying employers need to have some of that, but we need to limit it, and that's the main goal of what I'm trying to accomplish on this, and I would love to see us pare this down and make it more user-friendly, because you and I have had the same conversation. It's a little bit hard to understand, and it's all-encompassing. So, but thank you for all the work that you've done.
One more question. Dr. Blackwell, just get back on the height thing again.
Yes, sir.
So say if, and I guess right now it's more applied toward north of the river with corporate offices and stuff, but as it comes down, and say that corporate office wants to do a 6-story building, is that just by each incident, they just come and ask for it, or are y'all planning to raise the ordinance? The
So that's part of
maximum?
what we've asked our Recode consultants to work on, is looking at revisiting that height limitation. Because right now, if someone wanted to come in and do a 75-foot office building, a nice quality high-rise, they wouldn't be able to do it.
Right now, they couldn't even get a variance to do it?
I'd have to double check on the variance language, but I'll have to get back to you on that.
I have one last comment. One, thank you for this small area plan. When council began to adopt small area plans, I think it was a huge step forward to stopping bad growth. And certainly the one-size-fits-all policy that we had tried for the past few decades was clearly not working and needed to be revamped. And I think this is a huge step forward. I have a personal philosophy that planning and economic development are one and the same. That those are, or at least they are so intertwined that you cannot separate them. So I am curious, has the Economic Development Department and RFATs, have they reviewed this small area plan and given their blessing? Because in order to make this happen, you're going to need their buy-in, and you're also going to need the transportation, because this is littered with transportation issues that'll have to be addressed, and RFATs is certainly one of the ones that would be looking at this corridor very heavily. So have they seen this and given feedback on this?
Yeah, so the Economic Development Department, they helped draft a good portion of this report that you have, and particularly the Economic Development section. So they certainly have, and there's buy-in from them on this. As for RFATs, they've been made aware of the plan. We didn't solicit their direct feedback. Recognizing that RFATs is the MPO and they're responsible for the transportation planning in York County, we tread lightly in our recommendations in our transportation section, so we can certainly reach out to them and see if they're on board with all of those. And I'm sure they'd be delighted to hear that we're recommending we implement their Collector Street plan.
Well, I'm sure, yeah, that would be a huge move for them. I will say I would like to see RFATs, if for no other reason than RFATs with the long-range planning and just from a standpoint of setting aside funding. There will be roads, there will be infrastructure that would have to, if you use as an example a Red Venture type style park, if a park along those lines came in, there's certainly not the existing infrastructure, there's certainly no light rail, there's certainly no buses. All of this, and that is all falls kind of underneath RFATs, and should certainly, they should have at least be an idea this might be coming or may happen in the next few decades. We never had a motion. Is there a motion to approve this?
Move to approve first reading.
Second.
Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, hearing none, motion passes. Committee and other reports. Finance and Operations Committee, Chairwoman Christy Cox.
Finance and Operations met today at 5:15 to consider applications for service for the following boards, and we're making these following recommendations. As for the CVB, Shay Maple to serve a first term at-large in the at-large position. Zoning Board of Appeals, Jeffrey Hunter, second term for District 1, and John Gast, first term for District 7. Keep York County Beautiful, Mark Schumpert, first term, District 6. York County Natural Gas Board, third term for Albert Hanlon. Catawba Council of Governments is Mike Fuser for a first term for the elected official designation. The ATAX Advisory Committee, Bill Gamble, Brant Hinkle, and Andy Starr, all for second terms. Economic Development Board, we had some discussion about that when there are 13 out of the 18 existing board slots that are vacant, and that could really make a very big difference in the way this is structured. So we had some discussion about, and prior to that, when we were discussing P3, there was some recommendations to reduce that, an 18-member board just being too large to be able to get things done and too large to be able to defer other matters for them to look at. At the same time, we don't want to slow down the strategic plan and getting a consultant for that. So the existing board members, we understand they're going to move forward and go ahead and start that ball rolling again and not stop that. But I think council does need to take a look at how we want to structure that board and how we can reduce it. And the committee had some ideas, but I think this is something that we need to get on the agenda fairly soon, not let that drag out.
Perhaps that could be at one of our council workshops where we discuss the plan and perhaps the makeup of the new board. Any council member new non-agenda comments? Wow.
I do have one,
Oh.
sorry.
Ms. Cox.
So I spoke with Bump Roddy before this meeting, and he had some questions about why we are going the route of requiring on the volunteer pay. We're requiring them to receive W-2s instead of 1099s. I understand Lancaster County, there's a split. Lancaster County does it one way, other counties do it another. I think, to the extent that Justice and Public Safety is going to have a committee meeting, if they are anytime soon, I would ask that you guys take a look at that. If not, if we could just get some feedback from staff as to why that was suggested and why that's better than what the Lancaster alternative is.
Andy, you want to put that on the agenda for next Friday week?
So your next meeting is?
Week from this Friday.
Week from Friday.
So Andy will put it on there.
Ms. Love?
I hesitate to bring this up, but I think it's necessary. As the zoning committee chair and as council member who's dealing with something in my district that is bordering on heartbreaking, I think that it's important for us to realize the value of a historic home in York County. So I just want to put this on your radar so that we can, we've got people here tonight from planning and zoning, and I think that's great because I feel like there should be some type of zoning when I look at this, just a small area plan for the I-77 corridor and the small area plan that's coming up for mine. There is no zoning code. There's no zoning for something that is a 200-year-old house, for example. So I would like for us to consider that and be able to zone a property, even if it's on a major road. It might be worth more than something that's out in a field, way out somewhere, but ultimately, these things aren't going to be way out in a field somewhere. So I'm referring to the bigger zone that is on Highway 49, and this home dates back to the 1700s, and it's just very historic. And it is zone BD3. Property is currently under contract, and we do not know who is purchasing that property and what that property will become, but I have been told that the house will be torn down, and the house is in excellent condition. So just in having to deal with this over the past few weeks, realizing that I believe there's just been an oversight in zoning on this. That should never be in our comprehensive plan as a BD3 zoning. So this particular property, just so you know, it does date back to the 1700s, but the person who owned the house also, their family also began Glencairn Gardens and founded the town of Clover, and also residents of this home also founded First Baptist Church in Clover. So it is a very rich heritage that we are looking at losing. So it just weighs very heavy on my heart. So just something that I think in my small area plan I'd like to have some other color that we can designate, something that is historic and probably should be kept alive.
Anyone else? I will bring up, I had sent an email to staff last week. I wanted to bring it up again. I continue to be contacted by people who live on Baxter Lane and the potential cul-de-sacing of Baxter Lane, and with the new road coming through for the warehouse distribution. And I would ask staff to continue to look at that and try to find ways, if possible, to keep Baxter Lane open. I realize that they will have to cross over traffic from where there will be 18-wheelers now, but it would appear that the people who live there, that is what they want. And if it is all possible, I would ask us to do that. Perhaps Baxter Lane has to become a right-in, right-out only type of road, but I would at least ask us to look at it and see if there's any flexibility. Citizen concerns. Marissa Harris to address council regarding her property rezoning located at 1766 South Parham Road.
Good evening. My name is Marissa Harris. I reside at 1766 South Parham Road. I'm here tonight to request your assistance with a rezoning request that I submitted on December 10th. Ms. Brogdon has distributed some information to you that I've supplied that will provide even more details than I'm going to get into tonight. Prior to the public hearing regarding the amended overlay, I contacted Allison Love, who is my council lady, for clarification on the overlay. There was a map that she had sent out in an email that was kind of blurry and the line was fuzzy. I could tell that my property was located on that line, which then caused me to have some questions and reached out to her directly. You'll see in the packet that I've given to you that correspondence that was with her, which was held on November 3rd, because of the hearing being scheduled for November 4th. I requested to know if my lot was going to be included in that overlay, to which she confirmed that it would not be included and would not be impacted. You will see in that Facebook correspondence through her York County Council personal page that we went back and forth in some of that correspondence, asking several questions, and she then confirmed that. Unfortunately, I need to rezone this for personal reasons from the currently 5-acre agricultural lot to 2 RUD1 lots. Both lots will be exceeding 2 acres. There's significant financial implications if I'm not able to rezone this to RUD1 and separate the 2 lots. I am asking that you honor the word that Allison has put in that correspondence and allow me to have this request approved, even though I do understand it's not an easy request. I don't believe it was the intent of York County Council to limit the best use of an individual owner's parcel with this overlay, and if I'd been provided accurate information, my packet would have been submitted prior to December 2nd, so that it would have been in time for review. I do request tonight that you amend the boundary of that overlay. I think one of the most encouraging things for me tonight to hear is that you all do consider some specific and special requests, such as the historical home and this Baxter Street, because I do understand this is a special request and would not just be something that's easily approved. It would take some work on your part, but I would request that you consider that and would certainly be a part of the solution if I were offered that opportunity.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Is there a motion for executive session?
Yes, sir. Excuse me. Move we go into executive session for receipt of legal advice, condemnation Pennies Project 11149-004, track 72. For receipt of legal advice on condemnation Pennies Project 11149-004, track 89. Receipt of legal advice on condemnation Pennies Project 11149-004, track 71. And legal advice for condemnation Pennies Project 11149-004, track 107, for a contractual matter involving Good Motor Company and a contractual matter involving Convenience Center site.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We are in executive session. We have exited executive session. Are there any motions?
Excuse me. Yes, sir. Motion to authorize settlement amounts up to limits as discussed in executive session on project 11149-004, track 72.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion passes.
Motion to authorize settlement amounts up to limits as discussed in executive session on condemnation Pennies Project 11149-004, tract 89.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, hearing none, motion passes.
Motion to authorize filing of condemnation on Pennies Project 11149-004, tract 71.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, hearing none, motion passes.
Motion to authorize filing of condemnation actions on Pennies Project 11149-004, track 107.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, hearing none, motion passes.
Motion to authorize negotiations for the contractual negotiations on the Good Motor Company site.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
No.
Motion passes.
Motion to authorize contractual negotiations on the Convenience Center site as discussed in executive session.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion passes. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn. Second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. We are adjourned.